What's going on YouTube? Johnny here, back with another video for you guys. As always, hope everyone's been doing well and that you had a great weekend so far. Today's episode for our Sunday dinner, we'll be making meatloaf. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into the cooking. Alright, and I'm still wearing the beanie. It keeps me nice and warm and I actually like that. So that's good. As far as our ingredients, we have our salt, we have our parsley, pepper, we have onions, garlic, we have our panko breadcrumbs. And a quick side note about this, you can use plain panko, and then you can also use plain breadcrumbs. My grandmother, when she was making meatloaf before, she would actually take pieces from the loaf of bread and just actually tear the bread apart herself. So it really just depends on what you prefer and what you like. We have our milk, we have our eggs, and then for the important part of the meatloaf is the actual meat. So we have our prepackaged meatloaf mix, and this consists of veal, beef, and pork. And the cool thing about meatloaf, you can get really creative and there's many different ways to cater that to your preference. So for instance, if you prefer all ground beef, you can just use that. You can mix in ground turkey, ground chicken, whatever it may be. But that's that. So I'm gonna go ahead and start sauteing the onions and then we'll get into the video. All right, so up first, we're gonna add some olive oil to the pan. We'll let that get hot and then we'll saute the onions on a medium heat. And an important note, you always want to leave the garlic toward the last part of the sauteing process because they can burn pretty easily. And if garlic burns, it gets really, really bitter and it ruins the entire meal. And that's something you don't want to happen. So that's that. All right, so the sauteing is done. So before we start on the actual meatloaf, we'll get the panko ready. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna add the milk and then we'll just mix that around, make sure everything gets absorbed and the milk really gets incorporated, and then we can let that sit for a little bit. All right, and a good helpful hint for before you start seasoning your mix, you can always break up the meat so that way it's just easier for the seasoning to get absorbed in there rather than having those in the beginning. We had the chunks of meat. So like I said, it just helps the ingredients to be absorbed. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna add some black pepper, and you can add other ingredients if you prefer. I know some people add some like vegetables into their meatloaf mix, ketchup, I don't know, some other things off the top of my head. I'm drawing a blank, but oh, cameraman throwing out some some answers from I phoned a friend, some barbecue sauce. So it really just depends on what you like, and you can always in this bit, you can always go. I mean, you want to be generous with the seasoning, but I'm gonna add the parsley, the sauteed onion and garlic, the eggs. Make sure we get all of that in there. And then now you can add, and this is what it looks like once you mix up the milk and the, well, at least in this case, the panko breadcrumbs. If you use a different kind of breadcrumbs, it may look a little different, but you get the gist. You want something to look like that, where it's nice and moist. And this really just helps keep the moisture within the meatloaf itself, and it also binds it together. So that's why we're adding this. All right, so one thing you do not want to do, you don't want to pinch, because if you overmix the meat, it can lead to it getting tough. So then what you'll do, you'll just kind of do like a fold and tuck and press. So boom, and you want to fold from the bottom, just make sure everything gets incorporated. And you can always add more of the seasoning in this process as well. It just kind of depends, like if you didn't add too much, obviously it's raw meat, so you don't want to do a taste test on that. But you can always eyeball the seasoning, and if there's something that you forgot to add in or that you'd like more of, you can always do that here as well. So again, just the scoop, tuck, press method. All right, guys, so this is what we're looking like with everything mixed together. So then now what we'll do, we'll take the meat, dump it out like that, set that aside, and then what we'll do, we'll just kind of form it and mold it into a loaf. And it really just, like I said, even the size of the loaf is personal preference too. And then we'll just get that ready for the loaf pan itself. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish this, and I will see you in the next bit. All right, guys, in correction from the last clip, I accidentally said loaf pan. I meant in the shape of a loaf. So here's what we're looking like. And I know some people, and we usually add some bacon or sausage patties on top, but we didn't have that today, so we're just keeping it plain. And that goes back to the creativity of cooking meatloaf. You can do it however you like. So with this, we have the oven set at 350, and we're going to leave it in there at least 45 minutes, maybe even at least an hour. The one thing you want to do is just make sure that the internal temp is, I'd say for the most part, I found better results around 160 degrees. But that's that. So it just depends on your oven and how hot things run, because, different equipment runs differently. So one thing to keep an eye out for is around 160 degrees. All right, guys, so while the meat is in the oven cooking, we'll start skinning the potato first before we cut that into chunks. But being that it's a Sunday, let me know down in the comments below what some of your favorite Sunday dinners are, what you guys do with your family. I know, usually people do some big feasts on Sunday, so I'd love to hear from you and what you guys do. All right, guys, so we have the potatoes peeled. So what we'll do is make sure it doesn't slip out like that. But we'll cut it into, you want to do similar pieces so that way it has an even cooking time. And we'll dump that in the water. And then after we get through all that, we'll add some salt to the water as well. All right, guys, so now we haven't started the potatoes yet because we want to time that towards the end of when the meatloaf is done cooking. So what we'll do is we'll just prep the broccoli. So then now we'll just cut the crowns of broccoli like that. We'll put them in the drainer or the colander, and then we'll give them a rinse before, once they're all cut up like that. So I'm gonna do that, and that is that for the broccoli. All right, guys, and this is after the first 45 minutes, so it'll definitely need another 15 to 20-ish minutes. All right, guys, so the potatoes have been drained, and we added about half a stick of butter in there. And a little helpful tip, I cut them into smaller chunks like that, rather than 1/2 block stick of butter, so that way it's easier to melt and incorporate within the potatoes. And you can either manually mash it or use some help. And if you remember what happened last time, so I called in some reinforcements. So here's what we're gonna do. Without sending potato flying everywhere. Oh, all right. We're not gonna do that, all right? I gotta do the safety inspection on this thing so it doesn't come flying out. Make sure that I set it up properly this time. So we'll do that. We'll mix that around, give that a nice head start, and then we'll add some milk and cream to that. So as I said, as I send that flying over the counter, just get this incorporated and a nice start to the potatoes. All right, and for the milk and cream, you just wanna add a little bit at a time, because if you get it too creamy, you can't fix it. So I'd rather adjust as needed and go little by little. And again, this is personal preference for how creamy you like your potatoes. But as you guys can see here, probably add a little bit more in there. So I'll go ahead and finish up the potatoes and then see you guys in the next bit. All right, guys, so this is what we're looking like right here. And then the final part, we can just season it with some salt and pepper and get those potatoes tasting nice and tasty. Forgot I was on the stove boiling. Alright, guys, so the meatloaf is almost done, so I'm gonna start steaming the broccoli, and that's why I added a little water in the pan, so that way it can create that steam bath for the broccoli. Alright, guys, so it's always good to have some help in the kitchen. So we're using packaged gravy, and still just as good as homemade. So then what we'll do, it's 1 cup of water per pack of gravy. So we're going to be doing 2 cups of water in total. But for the first cup, what I like doing is just adding about half, maybe a little more than half a cup of the water. And then that way I just stir as I go, so that way I can, get all the lumps out. Thank you, sorry. Been a long day, I'm tired. But this way, it doesn't become super, super lumpy, and I can really get the whisk around the entire edge of the pan on the inside. So I'll go ahead and finish up the gravy, and that'll be that. All right, so we're still in the gravy, just on the stove now. So about a medium to a medium high, and you want to stir constantly on this bit, because as the gravy starts to heat up, it'll become thick and it can again become lumpy. So that is why I'll stir constantly, and that'll be done sometime soon. So I'll keep on stirring away. Grab that. And whenever you cook it, the runoff from the meatloaf is here, this runoff is always normal. So yeah, here's what we're looking like on the meatloaf. We're gonna let that rest and sit for, I don't know, maybe like 10-ish minutes, no set time to be honest. But yeah, this is what we're looking like, and I'm gonna go ahead and finish up the gravy. Alright guys, so we have our vegetables here of broccoli, and what we'll do to make the vegetables taste even better, we'll add some salt and pepper to it. We'll add butter as well. Can't ever go wrong with butter. So there's that, there's one, and there's two. So I'll just mix that around to get the butter melting. Start that process just like that. And then we have our freshly grated Parmesan. So I'll mix that up, get the clumps out of that, and we'll add that to it as well. And that's why I didn't add a lot of salt in the beginning, because the Parmesan cheese will also bring salt into the flavor, into the mix. So that's that. All right, and this is kind of like it reminds me of the beef Wellington video that we did. Remember where it's like the moment of truth where you cut into it? So let's see. Meatloaf. Oops. Yeah, looking nice. Cool. So that's that. And then I'm gonna go ahead and plate my food, and I'll see you then. All right, guys, and there we go. Got the broccoli, meatloaf, mashed potatoes with gravy over it. Alright guys, and that concludes today's video. So as always, thank you so much for stopping by, tuning in, and supporting me in this channel. I hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, meatloaf is always fun to make. As I said in the video, you can always get creative, and there's a bunch of various ways you can prepare and make meatloaf. So I think it's fun. It's a creative meal to make. It's simple, and it's always tasty. But yeah, hope you guys enjoy the rest of your weekend. Make sure to click like, subscribe, and hit that notification button so you don't miss when I upload here on the channel. Take care, have a great upcoming week, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.